Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the BattleCast. I'm joined in another community deck guide video with a frequent visitor, Jimmy. Welcome back to the channel.
Hey, thanks for having me, Justin.
Cool. So he's actually here to talk about, at least what publicly is a seldom seen warband, which is Zarbag's Gits, who have always been mediocre. It's no joke that they're actually quite tricky to play, but you're here to say that they're up there. They're in the top.
Agreed. Yeah, I think there have been a lot of recent additions to the card pool and changes to the game that have enabled them to be really great in this meta currently. So, would love to share thoughts on how I think they can perform and how well they can perform.
Perfect. And give our listeners the tools to do so, because they are not necessarily straightforward. I can admit that myself. They're not a warband that I feel very comfortable with. So
That's right. No, they're certainly a warband that provides high upside if you want to take a deep dive into them, because there are definitely layers of complexity to them. But I think a lot of players do find that a lot of fun. So I hope other players can find the same enjoyment out of them as I have.
yes, and so some people might be wondering, how are deck guides coming out right now? Where is the experience coming from? And Jimmy's actually an avid participant and kind of community leader in the Vassal aspect of the game, which leads me to my first question. Have you played any recent online tournaments? How many folks were there, and how'd you do with these guys?
Yeah, no, thanks. And there is a community on the Vassal Discord for Warhammer Underworlds that has had several large online tournaments that I think have one, been a ton of fun to play in, but two, have, with the number of competitive players and good players from all over the world that have decided to join, are really up there with grand clashes I've attended personally. So I think the quality of gaming is very high. I think it's very convenient because we can all play from our home, from our computers, laptops, and I think it gives everyone an opportunity to play people from a variety of different metas and have a great competitive experience, even while we're all cooped up in either quarantine or semi-quarantine. So
Exactly.
there have been three large Vassal events in the past couple months since April. I ran the first tournament in April with about 30 or 32 players, I believe. The second event was in May with 62 players, and I placed 15th with the Gits and went 3-1. And the most recent one was a 45-player event that was last month, and I placed third out of 45 players.
Wow, that's pretty impressive. Yeah, and to Jimmy's point, if you've never tried tournament playing in Warhammer Underworlds, Vassal's an interesting place to start. Firstly, of course, because you don't have to commute. But secondly, there is a little bit of, anonymity. There's a little bit of space. So if anxiety is an issue, which it is for me in competitive gaming, being at your computer in your house, being able to, use the washroom if you need to, these are things that can't be overstated for a first tournament experience. So the Vassal community is lovely. There's a Discord. I'll link it in the description below. And if you're looking for, even in addition, some more thoughtful talk about the active meta, which doesn't necessarily happen on Facebook, Discord is a good place for that too. So yeah, don't let the pandemic, snuff out your love for the game. It's still happening out there. So I wanted to ask, because obviously it might be a bit of a surprise to some people that the Gits might be considered the top. So I wanted to ask you a couple of questions just about recent changes. So how big do you think the cap on Varklav's ability factored into the Git's own ability, coming to power?
Yeah, great question. I think so. The latest F.A.R and errata, I think, was probably one of the best updates to the game that I've seen since I've been a part of the game. Probably the best update to the game since the first F.A.R list or bar list back then. So I think the designers have really done a wonderful job of curating the game and the card pool appropriately, balancing things, and really taking the step to errata cards that need to be errated and abilities need to be errated, and also take a look at even faction cards, as we'll discuss in a little bit. But yeah, I think it's no secret that Thorns of the Bride Queen have been very, very strong for a very long time. And one of the keys to that has always been the fact that the VAR Claw push action is the best action in the game, frankly. It's the best action economy. Pushing 4 fighters, no tokens, 2 hexes. It's just it's pretty incredible. And I think they probably could have nerfed that action a little bit more, but the fact that you can only use it once is helpful, because then that gives you, once that push happens in a phase, at that point, their only recourse for moving models back on is moves or other pushes through cards, employees, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So it restricts Thorn's options a little more and creates more opportunity for counterplay, increase the value of a card like Mischievous Spirits.
Yeah.
I think, and also in case they lose boards and they have to, and they don't have 3 objectives, in that case, they used to use the VAR Claw action perhaps multiple times to get across to the other side of the board to get to the other objectives. It makes it a little more difficult for them to do that if they don't have sudden appearance in hand. So there's, I think, prior to this errata, I think that action was clearly the best action in the game for getting onto objectives and for mobility. I think the Gits scurry reaction, which they have on all their cards, was not as good, but still very good. But now I think the scurry action is perhaps on par with the VAR Claw action as far as its power level in getting onto objectives and also executing other parts of your game plan. Once that a little bit later, because while the Gits do put move tokens on after a scurry and they have to be next to each other, there are also other advantages because you can charge and also move other fighters at the same time with a scurry, and there are other tricks you can do that make that ability a little more flexible than a VAR Claw push in some circumstances. So overall, I think that errata does help level the playing field more between Thorns and Gits, which are have always been rivals as Horde warbands go.
And it's there's a lot to be said for, even if it wasn't necessarily a big change. I mean, top skill level Thorns players, they're going to make that VAR Claw push count. The difference, I think, is that average Thorns players would maybe use that action 2 times if they didn't use it optimally the first time. So now it has a little bit of a slap in the face. And even if that diverts people's attention to the Gits, who, as it turns out, have always been pretty good, now at least they're like, oh, VAR Claw got nerfed. Oh, look at this Gits ability I haven't really considered before. Well, that makes a big difference too.
Great point.
The other thing I wanted to touch on about the recent FAQ and whatever is the faction card nerf. So, we obviously saw the big 3 just get dismantled, hit pretty hard. We're talking, what the hell is it? Grimwatch. We saw Hrothgorn. We saw Thorns get their actual faction cards hit. And the Gits obviously didn't. So do you think their rise to power has a little bit due to not necessarily the Gits getting better, but just the big guys getting worse?
Yeah, no, great point. I think that, so I've been playing versions of this Gits deck before and after the F.A.R. I think they were still pretty good before this F.A.R, and I think they're much better after the F.A.R because a lot of those top decks, to your point, have been brought down in power level. And I think the restriction of faction cards is a wonderful addition to the game. It's just so hard, given the fact that the game's evolved over 3 seasons. The cards, for certain warbands, like power level has increased a little bit as the designers have gotten better designing good cards. I think there's no secret that objectives, for example, in seasons 2 are better than for faction objectives are better than season 2 than season 1, and season 3 probably better than season 2 even. So on a whole, so I think that when you have a situation where there's an inequity there between the different factions, and also not to mention just a variety of new faction abilities and fighter stats and everything else, it makes it difficult to try to control power level just through the universal pool. Because if you just hit the universal pool, then oftentimes you can depress those factions that maybe don't have quite as good selection of faction cards or fighter stats when you're trying to hit the most powerful factions, the most powerful warbands.
Yeah.
So this allows you to hit the most powerful warbands and factions, and not to hit those warbands that are maybe at B tier to help level the playing field. I mean, Magic is the best example. And hitting Harness of Storm for Curse Breakers hurts them slightly. The passive Curse Breakers and control Curse Breakers probably still take it, but others may not. And it's a great card to lose. So that probably levels the playing field for Magic more, because Curse Breakers were clearly the best Magic warband for a long time.
Without a doubt. Yeah. No, that's, well elaborated on. I agree. So we're going to jump into this deck here, and I've got it open here on Underworld DB, and we'll kind of go through it in the standard format. You're an old familiar with this way we do this, but so we've got a whopping 20 glory total from objectives, which is what a breath of fresh air that is. 20's a lot. So we've been seeing a lot of like 14s with the Rothkorns and stuff. 6 end phase and 6 score immediately. So why don't you take us through?
Sure, yeah, and then just to kind of introduce the deck in general. I call this deck the Amber Keys Gits. So it's a combination Amber Bone and Keys. I think it really combines two different play styles I really like. I've always enjoyed flex decks, as you know. I've played my Reavers deck was kind of an aggro denial flex build, and my Sepulchral Guard episode I did with you was a flex aggro objective build. The Magor's Fiends I took to Nottingham this past year was also flex aggro and objectives, and so is this deck. So I think it's a deck that can score objectives via the traditional standing on objectives, glory scoring that most horde warbands are pretty good at, but also combines an aggro element, which I think it makes them very flexible into a variety of different opponents they could face. So I think now that the Varclaw push has been nerfed slightly, I think Scurry is on par with that as one of the best warband abilities in the game to get onto objectives as far as action economy goes. So
no doubt.
They are the only other warband other than Thorns who can score temporary victory, for example, in one activation if they have 3 fighters next to each other, which you can start the game that way with the I believe it's Shattered,
the
Fractured board, the one with 3 in the middle.
Flip side of Molten Shard Pit.
Shattered or Fractured, correct. So so that's great. And also, if you look at so that's great for their objective potential. But if you look at their aggro potential, I think it's something that is not really noticeable at first, because you think of them as a horde objective style warband. You look at the starting fighter stats. There are only 2 warbands in the game that have 4 fighters that start with 2 damage, average or above average attack profile, meaning 2 hammer, 3 sword, and then also 3 move. And it's Magor's Fiends and Zarbag's Gits. So they can start out hitting and fighting with the best of them, with the 2 Squigs, Drizzt, and Zarbag himself.
Yeah, that is an interesting point.
So I think if you look at them, there are other warbands with lots of great fighters that can do a lot of damage, but the fact that they can have this amount of damage and accuracy from 4 different sources, and more importantly, these are fighters that you don't need to also sit on the objectives. You almost have 2 different warbands. You have your aggro warband and your objective holding warband.
And it's very valuable, obviously, because the greatest weakness of an all objective warband is you get on your objectives and sit there, and somebody comes in and just mucks you up, pushes you off. But if you can sit on your objectives and then run people into their territory to fight them too, it's like, are they really going to run past these people to get to your objectives? Like that's right. Much riskier.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh yeah. Very risky, especially with if you are able to have a lot of good upgrades and ploys that to enable you to add accuracy and damage pretty quickly on your fighters.
So you're telling me you've made a deck where you roll dice
I do.
Um,
But I roll lots of dice, so hopefully the attack's hit. But
he's crazy, ladies and gentlemen. He's crazy.
I know. So, but going into the objectives, to your point, so I think it's a combination of there's a few objectives in here that are that work well with aggro play. Most of them center around is a more objective holding play style. And that's, again, going back to the theme that there are almost two different warbands with Gits. There's the objective holding warband, and then there's the aggro warband. So for me, I want the aggro models to focus on killing models, and the rest of the warband can sit on objectives and score glory that way. So a big thing with Gits, and is this advice for anyone playing Gits, is that there are different stages of the game. The first phase of the game, your most important goal is to inspire. So you have to inspire. They get such a great stat boost off that inspire. They, all the Gits go to 2 dodge. Drizzy goes to 3 hammers in his attack. Zarbag gets cleave. I mean, they're really, really incredible when they inspire. And it takes 3 glory. So I think in your objective deck, the first thing you need to think about is what objectives can I have in there to score easily in the first phase to get to that 3 glory total. The first is Scrum. So Gits are the only warband in the game outside of Mollog technically, but that's he will never take Scrum because it's really not very efficient for him to take it. They can start the game and score Scrum without an activation. So you can, in the way you deploy the squigs, you can place them so that you have 4 fighters all positioned together. And just starting the game, and after a single activation, either drawing a power card, your opponent moves, your opponent does something, and score glory after that activation. So that is it's so incredible for them.
Oh God!
It helps them get to that 3 glory hump, and once they get to that 3 glory hump, it is over that 3 glory hump. It is they can get pretty scary and very tanky, very fast. So Scrum is wonderful for them, and then of course temporary victory. If you start with 3 objectives or start with 2 objectives, and an opponent places one of the objectives they place close enough to your deployment zone, you can conceivably score temporary victory plus either or and Scrum and calculated risk all in one activation to get the 3 glory right off the bat. And when that happens, it's pretty devastating. Not only is it 3 glory,
it's a cycle too. I mean, you basically pitched your first hand and scored 5 glory, 4 glory.
And scored 3 glory and inspired almost your whole warband.
Yeah, it's crazy, man.
So the fact that those objectives exist right now all at the same time makes this deck very scary if you draw into the right objective hand early. And the fact that there are 3 of them, you're probably going to draw into at least one of them.
Yeah, it's no surprise that it's your 3 restricted cards right there.
It is, yeah. There are plenty of other great restricted cards they could use. I just have never, I've never seen any other combination of restricted cards that can provide this warband with so many benefits as these 2.
As you say, inspiring, paramount. Yeah,
exactly, paramount. So, outside of that, I don't have any faction cards in here for Gits. One I'd like to talk about is Malicious Kill. So that's a sneaky one that most people have not seen before because they see obliterated typically with Gits.
Yeah.
And as a quick aside, I guess I'll say I don't use Snurk very much in this build. Snurk is a ton of fun, and everyone always laughs when you roll 4 die and see where he goes. But from a competitive standpoint,
it's crazy.
Yeah, it's really, you really have to build your whole deck around him for it to be somewhat reliable. And even then, you can really screw you over with a really bad spin. So
totally.
I've just never been a fan of obliterated. So Malicious Kill, though, is a great surge.
And as evidenced by your Amber Bone aspect of the deck. I mean, yeah, everyone can throw down.
Correct. No, correct. Yeah, so I think anyone can throw down. I think it's very common for an opponent to have 2 upgrades on a model, and I'm usually going to want to kill it. Once it has 2 upgrades, it'll be a threat. And any time the second phase on, there's usually a target out there like that. That's 2 glory per kill, and you combine that with an Amberbone Dagger extra glory, you can get 4 glory per kill with Malicious Kill in hand. So that's a great card. And Branching Fate, just because I roll 3 dice or more so often, it's probably one of the weaker surges I have. But the fact that I have so many sources of 3 dice rolls, I think it can be good. That's probably one that I would look to replace in the future card update if there was a better one that came out. And for the surges, lastly, martyred. That just I talked about this in the Sepulchral Guard episode with you, but in a Horde warband, I like that card because in this type of warband, it's going to flex aggro. There's always multiple things you want to be doing.
Mm-hmm.
Some things involve getting onto objectives, which may not involve attacks. Other things may involve attacks. It's kind of a nice hedge because let's say you draw that in hand and your opponent goes first, they're probably going to kill a model. You score martyred. That's great. You cycle an objective. If you go first, there's always something else you can do. Yep. Maybe you want to attack a model with 4 or 5 wounds. You're not going to one-shot it, but you want to get one attack in so you don't kill it. Mm-hmm. You want to get it down to like, a more manageable number of wounds, 2 or 3. Yeah. You can attack that model. You can move a model onto an objective. You can scurry onto objectives. There are tons of things you can do that can still accomplish your goals for your warband, but not kill a model immediately. Then kill one of your models, you score martyred, and you can attack them after that the rest of the phase. So it's just a really nice hedge in this deck that I like using.
Yeah, you're kind of like, okay, when do I scurry onto objectives? Oh, I drew martyred. Well, I guess I'll do that first, and maybe I'll kill my guy, and then score that too.
Exactly.
Yeah,
so
it makes sense.
And then as far there's a lot of the other objectives are pretty self-explanatory. Fired up is pretty easy. Solid game is pretty easy. Path to victory is pretty easy because you're usually going to be sitting on 2 objectives and trying to kill people.
Yeah, it's beauty.
So supremacy and uncontested, that's really how I got to 20. And
yeah, those are big.
Uncontested is a great card for an objective warband, especially now that the meta has shifted away from having a ton of hold objective warbands out there.
Yeah,
I think there are a lot more aggro warbands out there like Scathe. There's lots of warbands like Hrothgorn like to destroy objectives after sitting near them or sitting on them. So that's given the fact that you're always going to have 2 objectives on your side to sit on, and I'm almost always going to have Gits standing on objectives. That's a great card for this deck. And Supremacy, before the F.A.R, where they had restricted Nightmare in the Shadows and Restless Prize and a lot of this other anti-objective tech, I actually had removed that card from this deck.
It's impossible.
It literally was impossible in the previous meta of the game. But since they got rid of a lot of those cards, I found it's much easier to score, so I put it back.
Yeah, and like it, there is something to be said for forcing your opponent to use the cards they've brought to the game. I mean, it's just you're like, I'm going to score supremacy. And like, I know you could have 2 push cards in your hand, but let's see it, right? Oh, he played it? Fine. I wasn't like, we weren't banking on supremacy per se, but yeah.
Sure. And if they don't have those cards, then you score it, and that's a big swing. Yeah,
it's a big swing. Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. I love the idea of the flex with like Path to Glory, and I love your restricted cards. I mean, you're right, getting the 3 glory.
Exactly. And then I will say too, the games that I lose are typically the games when I don't inspire after the first phase. If they're uninspired by the start of the second phase, that's probably a game that you have a good chance of winning into Gits.
Yeah, no kidding. And I will just say, Fired Up obviously is dope because Snurk is just like, that guy knows how to inspire.
Exactly. And it's something that I usually save his inspire reaction to stop an opposing reaction, such as
Ripa's,
stopping Ripa's jaw attack, or stopping an endless malice, or lightning assault, things like that. However, I think if I have Fired Up in hand, I will inspire him. But again, I inspire him after typically a move action onto an objective. And we'll talk about that more on the boards. But I think in this bill for this warband, as I said, I don't make use of Snurk's inspired side very much, and don't make use of his spin much. But what he is great at is walking 2 hexes through a lethal to get onto an objective, scoring calculated risk, and not dying if he's pushed back into that lethal hex. So the fact that he has 3 wounds is great. One of the things that is a bummer about the Gits, if you move them onto objective through a lethal to score calc risk, just 1 push typically can kill them and score glory for your opponent. But if it's Snurk, if he's pushed off, it's not a big deal. He goes down to 1 wound, and then it takes an attack or a ploy to kill him. So I usually wait to inspire him until after he's moved on to an objective. And then he's, again, less of a target to get, just killed and give a glory up to my opponent by getting pushed back into the lethal hex.
As an aside, because you obviously are playing lots of competitive games, how does using his reaction to interrupt things work? Because in my experience in casual play, it's almost always somebody rolls their dice, you roll your defense dice, and they're like lightning assault, and you're like, I'm actually going to use Snurk's reaction. But in competitive play, like obviously you want to make that known before, because you shouldn't really know that they're going to play this card, right? So it's like, how does that work?
Correct. It's frankly, it's one of the weaknesses of the game, and I hope they provide a little clarity in the future around reaction windows. I think there among competitive players is typically a 3 to 4 second courtesy pause before a reaction window is up, where people just kind of stay a little quiet and then play a card to give the opponent the opportunity to play a reaction if they have priority. I think that's kind of what a lot of competitive players try to do. I'm sure have been many times I've inspired Snurk immediately after a failed attack, and the opponent did not have Endless Malice in hand, for example. But that's how it's supposed to work.
That's how it's supposed to work.
I'm not supposed to know that you have that in your hand. But if it's an important attack, and I feel like, okay, I really don't want this fighter to die, and I'm glad, the Bride Queen missed this first time, I'm going to inspire him right after that. And that's the way it's supposed to happen. So, but I think, most competitive players, there's kind of a 3 to 4 second courtesy wait time, and then wait another card. Because again, the attacker in that position controls the cadence, so they can control when they want to push and all those things. So
I would be chapped if I made an attack, waited, lightning assault, and they're like, actually, and you're like, nah, because it's like, I don't know, how do you dispute it, right? Like, how do you?
That would be a situation, and if it happens, anyone who's listening, I would, if you wait the several seconds to for your opponent to play that card, if that happened and it was a big deal in the game, I would certainly call the TO over and just explain to them, hey, look, I waited, I waited for them to play the card and they didn't, and then I did my thing, and I think most TOs would rule that in your favor.
Oh, good. Yeah, I haven't had that experience come up, but anyway, good. Moving on to Gambits. Take us through these Gambits here.
Yeah, sure. I think again, one of the nice things about Gits is through Scurry and through the fact they have so many fighters, I can score, and the fact that they're all 3 movement and 4 when inspired, I can score a lot of these cards, calculated risk, temporary victory, scrum, without needing ploys. I think there are a lot of builds that which are good builds, which require you to stack your gambits, the gambits in your deck in order to score your objectives. For example, if someone's trying to score a shortcut and they're not despoilers, they'll have stuff like confusion in there and sudden appearance and other stuff like that. So you have to commit gambit slots in order to score your objective deck, and that's not a bad decision. Shortcut's a great card to score, and you just play a gambit. Your gambits will be occupied by cards that you need to score your objectives. Again, nice thing about Gits, I don't really need any of my gambits to score any of the stuff in the objective deck. So as a result, that's where I can take all the gambits, all the upgrades, and focus on things that I want to have, not need to have. Since the F.A.R, one change I've made, instead of having Nightmare in the Shadows, I've added Mirror Move, which is just an excellent card and highly recommend anyone take that. It's just it also can block some reaction windows, and it's just a very fun card to have them push one of your models off and you push one of their models off an objective or push it away and things like that. So it's a great card. I think obviously things like sidestep and distraction or auto takes, spectral wings is great for any aggro warband trying to get to a right target.
Yep.
Haymaker,
the guy with 2 upgrades.
That's right, exactly. Haymaker is great because I don't. This is a good note to add about Gits. Speaking about them more as an aggro warband now, not as the objective holding warband. One of the nice things of having 9 models, there's obviously downsides. You give up a lot of glory sometimes, but one of the nice things about having 9 models and lots of ploys and upgrades that enable aggro playstyle, I can in one power step pretty much turn any one of these little guys into a missile that can go in and one shot a 4-wound fighter typically.
Yeah.
So, between stuff like Haymaker and especially Inspired Attack, which is wonderful for Gits.
Yeah, so powerful.
+1 dice, +1 damage on Drizzt, making him a 4 hammer, 3 damage fighter with 1 card when he's inspired is pretty incredible. And just add 1 damage upgrade, and he's 4 damage, 4 hammers, 4 damage, and 1 shot in most fighters in the game. That's a pretty scary combination. So
yeah,
I think the ability to use some of these cards to just tool up a fighter in 1 power step to go and charge and get rid of an important model is key. And then some of the other tech cards here, which are particularly great for Gits. First, Buried Instinct. Unbelievable card. Unbelievable card for 2 dodge warbands. I mean, so unbelievable. Slightly better in Thorns, of course, because they have Treacherous Foe, which they can score off this card, which is pretty crazy.
Yeah.
And it's but outstanding card. Such a great card because, again, it counters your opponent after they've already committed an action. Mm-hmm. So opponents typically look for, let's say they're looking for a target they feel is a softer target, or a target they really need to get off an objective, things like that for a charge. Yeah. They will have already made this decision before you play this card, and then all of a sudden you perhaps turn that decision to a bad decision with this reaction, because then the model can't be pushed off, and they're far more defensively capable of resisting that attack with 2 guard dice if they're on 2 dodge. So
it's nasty. Takes away the consolation prize. You're like, well, I didn't kill you, but I push you off. You're like, you didn't do any.
Exactly. And if they're a core, you can reroll. I mean, now that Survival Instincts is restricted, I don't have that in this deck. So
versus Hawthorne, I guess.
Yeah. And versus Hawthorne's great. Exactly. So just such a great card.
Yeah, super strong.
And then also for defensive tech, I have Grievous Riposte. It's kind of a
love it.
A little tech play for Gits. I found it to be very fun and also helpful in a lot of matchups, because given the 2 defense dice that most Gits have, and given the fact that I'm probably going to crit defense, hopefully, knock on wood, at some point throughout the game, because the opponent can't ignore the Gits, so they're going to attack him at some point. Yeah. If they ignore him, then they're just going to get annihilated. So once they attack me back, if I crit defend, doing 2 damage, that 1 shot's a Ghoul, that 1 shot's a Chain Rasp, or that takes a 4 wound fighter into 1 shot range just about anybody I have. So it's a really, really big swing.
It's cute. I like it.
It's like a mini rebound, honestly, but it's even better than a rebound because I only play it when it goes off. So as opposed to playing it and the chance of it not really doing anything, I only play it when it goes off. I will note it's only versus range 1 attacks. So sadly, versus Mollog versus any range 3 attacks doesn't really work.
Briar Queen,
but into models with range 1 attacks, it's really, really fun.
Yeah, it might honestly be my favorite part of your deck. Like this is what I love about the F.A.R. right now, is you just have some really odd cards coming out of the shadows. You're like, what the fuck? And you're like, well, I used all of my restricted for objectives, so you're about to see some janky ass stuff coming through. I like that a lot. Yeah, I'll point out the mirror move, because this might be clear, but it wasn't clear to me at first. But like, there obviously are several there's several push 2 cards out there. We're talking Skace, we're talking Grash Racks, and I believe it would apply, although your guys would just die, to like some knockback. But if they play something and push their guy too, you can play this and push your guy too, which is crazy.
Correct. Exactly. Yep, absolutely. So you can play it to you play it after, you can go back to the whole Varclaw thing, play it after a Varclaw push and push 1 of your models too. So
right. Saucy.
Yeah, it's a great card. A lot of utility, definitely a high skill cap card, because you have to really keep track of when to use it, when you can use it, when you can't use it. But it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. Yeah.
It's a beauty. And then the other really fun part of your deck, which is the upgrades.
That's right. Oh, actually, one more. I'll talk about Mischievous Spirits. Which we've talked about this before, but since Restless Prize is now restricted, Mischievous Spirits is is such a great card, I think, for one, countering objective play, scoring stuff like uncontested, but also scoring your own objective cards, because again, you know it's in your hand, but your opponent doesn't. So as a result, I'm not going to scurry onto objectives if I intend to play Mischievous Spirit soon and move those objectives.
That's
So
right.
I can wait until the opponent, puts his guys onto his objectives before I play this card.
Yeah.
Play it and then scurry him, and either move my guys in my objectives under my guys right away and save the position, or then move them on with a scurry afterwards. So it's just the fact that you have that card in hand and your opponent doesn't is the power in that card. So I think it's a card that be difficult to use. Just make sure you're planning out your activations in that phase around having that card in your hand. Yeah.
Yes, you do. That's true. Cool. All right. Upgrade time.
Yeah. So this is where there's been a slight change to the upgrade since the F.A.R. Given the fact that, again, Nightmare in the Shadows, Restless Prize, those cards are gone. I've added 2 keys to this deck. Previously, it was 4 Amberbone weapons, but I've ditched the Amberbone Axe and Amberbone Hammer for 2 keys.
What was your attraction to number 4 and 5?
Yeah, I think for me, this is, and let me just say this, maybe a better player can come up with good reasonings for having certain numbers over others. For me, the one card, or I was thinking about, is Shifting Madness, which is now a restricted card with the ghouls, where they want to be on 1 through 3.
Right.
And if I have a key model on 1 through 3 and they're really gunning for that, they may try to push me off. And it's really kind of a corner case thing. It doesn't impact most matchups. If I had 1 or 2, would it change the performance of my deck? Probably not. But just if there was any small reason, that was it. So 4 and 5 are just not objectives that ghouls are looking for.
Very rational answer. I was expecting something like, I really like the look of Objective 5. I think it's really nice.
I guess I'm betraying that I'm more of a robot than a human being, perhaps.
Yeah, I also, Objective 5 is always the lonely one. Hey, sorry, taking us to
yeah. No problem. So, but yeah, I think outside of that, I think really obviously Fenway Crystal is great for any really any warband, an aggro warband or an objective holding warband. But since I'm doing both, obviously a no-brainer.
Well, it's even better now because there was a period of the game where, you had every push at your disposal, every whatever, and like you could put this on somebody and not have anywhere to go. I mean, it's easy enough to avoid, but there was a period where there were so many moving objective and pushing people that you could put this on somebody and somebody could basically take away all the objectives and then you'd be fucked. So now it's a lot harder.
Correct, and that's a great point, because I've been burned with that in the past, of putting Fenway Crystal on a model and having all the targets taken away in 1 power step. So it's not without risk. It's a great point. I think it's a card you have to be very careful. It's a bet to place it onto an important model, because if those objectives end up being covered before they can activate, that model's sitting there for a while. So yeah, it is definitely a risk to put Fenway Crystal on a model, given the fact that those open objective targets could be gone in that same power step. But sometimes it's a risk you take.
And it's less now. Again, Restless Prize was a big offender in that regard. Yeah,
correct. So. Obviously, most of the other upgrades here are aggro focused, which is a big part of the deck.
Love it.
I do want to stress for Tome of Glories and the Amberbone. The Amberbone's great for Gits in particular because it allows them to trade up on kills. So I wouldn't feel as confident with this type of aggro build in Gits if Amberbone weapons didn't exist, because when I send a model in to whatever 3 damage, 4 damage attack to kill an opposing model, my expectation is that model I just charged in is probably going to die at some point. Right?
Yep.
With 9 models that I have, I'm going to lose a lot of models and give up a lot of glory. Yep. But if that model has an Amberbone dagger, and again, it's great on any of the bow wielding Gits because they don't have a range 1 melee attack. It does
That's
much.
true. Yeah.
Give it to them, and they're move 4 and 2 dodge, and kind of a pain to deal with. So I can get them just about anywhere to upgrade them and do some damage. In addition to the 4 fighters that I talked about previously, Zarbag, Drizzt, and the Squigs. But if I can trade up by getting 2 glory effect kill and give up 1 glory on the back end when that model dies, I'm trading up and doing better for myself because I'm going to give up glory as Gits.
That's true.
And the Tome of Glories and Amberbone is also key, going back to the first thing we spoke about in inspiring this warband. So getting Tome of Glories in a model, getting that, that second or third glory to get you over to hump to inspire in the middle of a phase. Let's say you score Scrum in the first activation and upgrade one of your models to the Amberbone Dagger, charge a ghoul and kill it, and you're already inspired then because you scored 2 glory off that kill. So
that's big. That's true.
It really, early in the game, gives you that bump you need to get the 3 glory, get everybody inspired, and everyone gets a lot more dangerous.
Yeah, it turns what normally is almost like an equal trade into a regular kill for any other warband because the Gits are so prone to dying. But I mean, with 2 dodge, right? I love 2 dodge because anything can happen.
Yeah, no, I mean 2 dodge. That's the defensive profile of the Briar Queen, of Lady Harrow. I mean, it can be a pain to deal with. There have certainly been games when I've crit defended probably more than I should have and frustrated the opponent. So no joke, and especially with stuff like Buried Instinct, especially with stuff like Grievous Riposte to punish people for missing, and it can be a pain to get rid of these guys.
I love, anything can happen in Warhammer Underworlds. The more defense dice you have, it's just fucking, oh god.
That's right.
Stress. I like your upgrades. I think that's fun. I really like Amberbone. I think that's such a... I didn't really make the connection about the Amberbone translating to them inspiring faster, but you're absolutely right that it's not often you can turn an upgrade into inspiring people like it. That's nifty. Nice.
And as far as choosing these 2 over the others, most of the current Amberbone weapons, I'm assuming there's another one coming out in the next release, but they're all 2 hammers. Amberbone Spear is 3 swords, which is a similar accuracy profile. They're all 2 damage. I picked the Amberbone Spear, obviously because it's range 2, so it gives in a little extra reach for a model. And also if the opponent is range 1, then they can't immediately counterattack that guy. They have to charge or push into him to attack him. And so the extra range is great. It means you can't use Inspired Attack with that attack, by the way.
Or Sting of Urgrub,
or Sting of the Urgrub, correct. But the flexibility with that one is nice. Amberbone Dagger is, in my opinion, the second best Amberbone weapon out because on a crit you cleave, and there's a lot of Buried Instinct, Survival Instincts out there. A lot of folks going on guard, so that cleave can be very helpful. And it's the second source of cleave I have after Zarbag. I mean, when the Squigs inspire, they have cleave too, but sometimes that happens, sometimes that doesn't. So definitely have a second reliable source of cleave in the decks. That's nice.
That's cool, man. So we'll move on to the next part of the video, which is strategy. So we're going to talk about, I guess actually let's go to boards first because I think it'll lead in better. So talking about boards, I'm on Warhammer, or I'm on Underworlds DB. What's your, so like you usually have like a top 3 board choice for scenarios. What do you got?
Correct. So if I, this has changed since the F.A.R, since I added Supremacy. If I win, I'm usually taking 3 objectives into almost every matchup because obviously it makes it easier to score a temporary victory and also Supremacy, and helps me score uncontested because it means I have more objectives than they do on their side. So usually I'm taking 3 objectives. If I do take 3 objectives, the first choice is obviously going to be Shattered Refractor.
Yeah, beauty.
Shattered Refractor is, that's a scurry board with 3 starting hexes all in the middle. It's a wonderful board for Gits for so many reasons. First of all, obviously, you can chain 3 models in the middle for a single scurry that can then score temporary victory in 1 activation. It's a pretty spectacular board for them. Has a lethal hex for calculated risk. So meaning I can put my lethal hex on the opposing board to hopefully be behind an important model so they can push into it for some damage. And then, just really after that, pretty evenly placed starting hexes in 4 different corners, so I have some flexibility when deploying my models. And then the second choice after Shadow Refactor, if I get 3 objectives, typically going to be Penitent's Throne. So that, and again, going back to what I said earlier with the Scurry.
The 2/2s.
The 2/2s, correct. So 2 starting hexes adjacent to each other and having 2 of them. And there aren't that many. I think there are 3 boards.
Oh, look, you just scored Scrum.
Yeah, exactly. So, yep. So just having a squig in between any of those hexes, and you're good. Exactly. And I think I think there are 3, maybe only 3, maybe 4 boards. 4 boards. 4 boards with either 3 all adjacent to each other, like Shattered Refactor. That's the only one that does that. Or and there are 3 other boards where there are 2 starting hexes adjacent to each other twice. So
yeah,
that I think is so important because it gives you multiple scurry options. I think it's just really important to have that to get onto 3 objectives efficiently. That's the most important thing, and then after that, you can kind of deal with everything else.
Yeah, no, that's bonkers. Okay, so what if you they take 3 objectives?
Yeah, they take 3 objectives, and this is nice because it's a flex deck. I'm probably going to go aggressive into them. So for the first choice is going to be a Molten Shark Pit, and I'm going to deploy all my aggro models up at the very front of the board.
Yeah.
So, one nice tip with Molten Shard Pit, if you're playing with Gits and you're playing them in the way I play them, which is kind of that aggro flex, what I'll typically do is if you look at the board, there are 2 starting hexes adjacent to each other in the kind of upper edge there. I'll on those 3 starting hexes that are furthest up in the board, I'll put my 3 wound fighters like Zarbag, Snark, and Drizgit. And I'll typically put Drizgit in the middle one, with the 2 squigs flanking him on either side.
Yeah.
And behind him, that starting hex, I'll put someone like Prague or one of the other Gits. What I will typically do early, if not in the first activation or one of the first activations, I will charge Drizgit into the enemy, hopefully to kill a model with 2 wounds or just to get him out there and put some damage on someone, and then scurry that Git onto one of the objectives further back into my board.
Yeah.
So I can get a charge off, hopefully do some damage, and also not waste an activation putting one of those models on my 2 objectives sitting in my back line.
Yeah, it's so good.
So that's just a point to make for efficiency. Then also, too, as the added benefit of having Drizgit in the middle of the opposing warband, he's a pretty easy target, 3 wounds, just 1 shield for defense. But once he dies, then the squigs inspire. So you want him to be in the middle of the opposing warband first. If they don't want to kill him, once he inspires, he's 3 hammers, 2 damage, and he's a total pain to deal with. So they probably want to kill him. Then the squigs inspire. They haven't moved or charged yet. They can charge in.
Yeah, no, it really is impressive how much of a difference. Like you're like, I win if you kill him, and I win if you don't kill him. So it's all good.
Yeah, it's all about forcing the opponent into making bad decisions.
Yeah, that's good. So we got Molten Sharp Pit. What's another one you like if you lose the objectives?
Yeah, if I lose, and this choice is a little more on the suboptimal side, but I'll probably choose either Shattered Tower or Shishin Star Dial, depending upon what board my opponent places, and just can try to place my aggressive models furthest up, and have my objective scoring models, the gobos, sitting back. But yeah, in the end, the strategy is similar, where I'm just trying to get on the other side of the board, kill models, cause as much disruption as possible, and make sure the Gits are sitting back also and sitting on the 2 objectives I have on my side.
Yeah, no, those are good board choices for sure. And I just kind of thinking out loud here, I'd love to. It might be kind of fun one day or shortly, sometime before I put this video out, if I record you, maybe we'll hop on a TTS or something, and I'll just record you doing a scurry play, just like you're starting scurry play or something, just so people can kind of see what it's like. Because there's a certain way you want to move your models to, get everybody where you need them to and score the objectives, etc. So.
Correct. I think the order is very important. As I mentioned, one of the things I like to do is have I'll deploy Snurk onto one of the starting hexes adjacent to a lethal, and then also adjacent on the other side to an objective. So I can move him, if I have calculated risk in hand, and move him through the lethal hex. He only has 2 move to sit on the objective,
Yes.
then scurry the other guys. Also, folks have to remember that you can charge a model at the start of the scurry, and after they can complete the move action, scurry the other guys, then commit the attack at the end of the scurry chain.
Oh
So
yeah.
that's nice. And lastly, this was made clearer in errata, but I mean, all Gits players should have been playing it this way previously. But if you just do a move scurry chain, you cannot inspire Snurk at the end of that activation because the reaction to scurry has blocked your window to inspire.
Right. It's not a
Snurk.
super action or whatever.
Yeah. So that's always the way Gits players should have been playing it, but it's been made more clear in the errata, which is helpful, I'm sure.
So you've kind of touched over this, but we'll just firm it up as briskly as we can for strategy. So you kind of just went over the fighter placement. Snurk's your calculated risk guy, if at all possible. Drizzt, you like to get in the enemy territory because, if he dies, it's fine. And if he lives, it's fine. Any other fighter placements? It's mostly just for scurry, I guess. That's a big thing.
Yeah, great. And because there is a lot of nuance to this, and it's probably where playing a lot of games with the warband can help you get comfortable where you're placing the fighters.
Mm-hmm.
I typically want after the scurries, I typically so the scurry fighters are typically going to be the regular gobos. So stick it, red cap, those guys. I want them sitting on the objectives because they're least useful early on. If it's my preference to have stick it, red cap, and dibs sitting on the objectives. If I have to, Prague is one of them too. But the nice thing with Prague, when he inspires, he's actually pretty useful from an aggressive standpoint. He inspires to 3 hammers and 1 damage, but with an inspired attack and maybe a damage upgrade, that's 4 or 5 hammers or 3 damage, so he can get scary quick. And also he has that fun ability to reduce the amount of dice that opponents have when in the next attack after he attacks them. So he gets pretty useful. So I try not to have him sitting on objectives. And him just available to move and charge. And then for Zarbag, obviously a lot of folks, for good reason, try to protect their leader. I really don't care with Zarbag. I don't need him for any reason.
Yeah, he really does nothing for you.
I don't have any spells. I don't have any cards that really require him to stay alive. So as a result, he's just another aggro model. He 3 swords with cleave and 2 damage when inspired is pretty solid. And I just put him up front because I want to protect the 2 wound fighters. He's got 3 wounds, meaning it's a little harder to kill him up front. He's got 2 dodge early, so again, just
he's certainly not the most attractive model to take out. You'd much rather go for a squig. So there's really no risk of putting him up there. Yeah,
correct. Yeah, exactly. And that's just going back to that point too on the squigs. And most people who play Gits know this, but if you're playing into Gits, you probably want to try to kill the squigs first, and because
love killing squigs.
exactly. It's like kind of like whack-a-mole, right? They're on 1 dodge, 2 wounds. It's very easy to do it. When they inspire, they get a 2 dodge and get pretty crazy attack profiles. So
they're just scary all around. Like honestly, they're terrifying.
I mean, they're just walking giant jaws. That's all they are. So
not much dodge. So. For matchups, who do you love? Who do you love to face? Who when you see them, you're like, yeah, this is a W almost. So,
yeah, I think the best matchups in general are probably to other Horde warbands that aren't Thorns. I think this warband still does very well in the Thorns. Just that Thorns are very good. So I think this warband does well. Just Thorns are up there in power level, so I'm not going to say it's a good matchup just because Thorns are just such a great warband.
Yeah, it's kind of bullshit because you've turned your warband into a somewhat killing machine via cards and upgrades, etc. But the Thorns just turn into killing machines anyway. Like
Yes, yeah,
it just
they're
happens to them.
exactly, yeah, Briar Queen and Varclaw and Everhand. Yeah, they got some good fighters, and
Yeah.
they're great warbands. So I think
Yeah.
I do think this Gits deck plays very well into them.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, I guess I wouldn't go so far as say it's a good matchup. But I do think that this Gits deck plays very well into Grimwatch, Sepulchral Guard, other into
Crash racks. Yeah.
spoilers, just a lot of the
Mm.
large model count war bands.
Yeah.
Because
If you can pick a kill, it's just all the better.
yeah, and I just even if you trade kills, again with the Amber Bone, I'm probably trading up. I'm probably still scoring my objective deck because you're occupied with trying to kill the half of my warband that is going very aggressively into you.
Hmm.
And into Grimwatch in particular, either I have the 3 objectives and control the tempo for scoring temporary victory and supremacy and all that stuff, or they have the 3 objectives and I'm just Molten Shard pinning it up and charging 4 times and stopping the Inspire. So
Yeah. I
it's
think that, oh yeah, Grimwatch, right? You would definitely shut down their Inspire condition fairly quickly.
that's right. Yeah. So I think I play well into those war bands. I think the um, really, I don't know if this warband has. This may sound like a little bit ballsy. I don't know if it has too many like really bad matchups. I think
Hmm.
matchups that I think it's solid in most everything, just because it can be very flexible. The matchups that probably aren't great are an aggro Hrothgorn has the objective destruction in his deck.
Yeah.
That can be tough because it can be tough for me to kill Hrothgorn if he gets one of the big upgrades like Toughened Hide, which is now restricted, or a massive bulk on him, and they
Hmm.
can destroy objectives and score passively when they do that and all that fun stuff. And then stuff like Wild Hunts, they're specialists in killing 2 wound models, and
Yeah.
Far Striders are specialists in killing 2 wound models. So they're not. I can handle them because their glory ceilings are a little bit lower.
They are low. That's true. They are low.
But yeah, if they have a really great run on dice and they have a really poor one, I can kind of start running out of fighters. So yeah.
Yeah. I think that the point that I've taken away mostly from this interview is that, as you say, like this warband truly does sort of play like 2 warbands. And I think that's really nifty because you're always going to be accomplishing your goal, but your enemy who may have just, one way of doing things, he has to make a decision every time. Do I address the aggro? Do I stop his defensive from scoring? Do I accomplish my goal? Like what happened to my goal? Like do I, do I play my game plan? Jesus.
Yeah, great point. I think that you summarized it very well, Justin. I think that's probably the strength of this build is that it is kind of 2 war bands in one, and 2 war bands that can do different things very well. And so I think it's a lot of fun. Again, the downside is that you do give up a lot of glory. So if you do start running out of fighters, it can get tough. But yeah, hopefully at that point you've taken out a few of theirs as well, and kind of even the playing field a bit. But overall, yeah, I think it's the strength is it is versatile, 2 different war bands in one, and provides you a lot of options to play with.
Absolutely. Well said. And I think it's a really good guide on this warband. Yeah. Um, I want to close the interview out with some baseless speculation about the roadmap for Warhammer Underworlds 2020. Um,
Sure.
unrelated to this deck. Did you have any extra tips or anything to add to your thing? I
Oh
think
no, yeah, no, I think this yeah, is good, and yeah, thanks for asking.
yeah. So there's a couple things coming. Obviously, we know the warband's coming out. Multiplayer expansion. You thinking it's Arena Mortis? It looks like it's Arena Mortis. What do you think?
It could be, yeah, it could be, and but I think I would love to play the game multiplayer. I think it's a lot of fun. More people, the better, and it again creates a different atmosphere to the game. I think it's fun if the same rule set can provide fun experiences in strictly competitive play, but also in more casual play. So I think multiplayer is just more of a fun beer and pretzels type way of enjoying the game. And I think with the same rule set, same models, same dice, everything. If you could have multiple ways to play the game, I think it's better and better for players and better for the game itself.
Yeah, like I wonder what are they going to charge you money for? Because obviously Warhammer Underworlds has a multiplayer component to it. You can literally just put boards together. You can play a game. It's not competitive at all. Frankly, like I don't think it's that great, to be honest. I've played it a handful of times, and it's always just like whatever. I'd rather play. I'd rather play two one-on-one games than one four-player game. So I wonder what they're going to do here to make it, stand it out, worth money, whatever. Now the other one that, and possibly most interesting, is the free fighter card downloads for multiplayer. But fighter cards are obviously invaluable. Hearthstone's done this. Lots of card games do this, where they throw out templates and let people kind of come up with their own fan fiction instead of having to make their own card frame. So I think that's really cool. But do you think we'll see downloadable changes to old warband cards?
That's a great question. And in short, I don't know. In short, I think Games Workshop, I think they've done a lot of great things providing content for Warhammer Underworlds, providing the card databases on the website and things like that. I wouldn't be surprised if they did anything one way or another. I think they've shown that they've broken the mold a lot with this game and how they've not just this game but others recently, as far as how they've worked with the community and catered to the community. I think in the past they would try to monetize every little bit of piece of this, but now I think they're certainly providing a lot of content, a lot of resources to players, and I think they're far more player friendly than they have been in the past. So I think it'll be interesting to see what they do. But yeah, it'll be a lot of fun.
The most crazy lizard man, Russia creating coronavirus theory I've heard about this free fighter card download is this, and I think it's pretty interesting. All right, Steel Sky Production, Warhammer Underworld online creators, have not released the Chosen Axes because they caught wind from Games Workshop that they're errataing the Chosen Axes fighter cards through this downloadable free card app thing, and then they will release them with the changes.
Wow.
How does that sound?
That would be crazy and a ton of fun. I know Chosen Axes are a fan favorite, so that would be pretty wild. They certainly have had a lot of time during COVID to dream up crazy schemes like that. So I wouldn't put anything past them. That'd be pretty crazy if it happened. That'd be a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's the theory I heard from a viewer on my channel, and I was like, that's so crazy. It just might be true. Like, there's no reason why they didn't put out the Chosen Axes. So that's what I'm going with.
That's some big brain stuff right there.
That is super big brain. So as always, Jimmy, it's such a pleasure to have you on the channel. I love that you're, into the Vassal scene, and you're kind of keeping those who may not be playing Warhammer Underworlds as competitively as they used to up to date with what is, really shining in competitive play. And I think these Gits, this deck seems fun. And I like that it's flex because it's going to appeal to both sides and give people a great excuse to give this rather technical warband a go.
That's right. No, thanks. That's what I'd love if players listening could gather from this, is that competitive play is still out there and alive. I think there are a lot of dedicated players that are trying to keep it going amidst all the challenges we're facing. So, and in this warband in particular, Zarbag's Gits, I think if you put the time into them and put the practice in them, they can be a ton of fun and very rewarding. So it's fun to see them able to succeed in competitive play and to do well right now in the current meta. And again, speaking of the current meta, great job by GW in the latest F.A.R list. I think the game is probably in a better place than it has been in a very long time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it feels that way. I'd say it feels that way for sure. Yeah, you betcha. Cool, man. Well, it's always a pleasure, and I'll give this deck a go on the channel for sure.
Great. All right. Thanks, Justin. See you.
Cheers. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please consider supporting the channel by liking this video or subscribing to the channel, and especially hitting that bell icon. Feel free to leave comments in the comments section below. I love talking with you guys. Until next video, I'll see you then. Thanks.